Ko tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai, e rau rangatira mā, i ngā mātā waka o te motu, i ngā kaimahi, i ngā mema katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Me au noi tātou. He hōnere he kōrea ki te atua, he maungārungu ki te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata. Whakahonoretia te kingi Māori tūheitia, ko tatau te wherowhero te tuawhitu, rire, rire hau, pai mā rire. Welcome everybody who's joined us today. This is our first Stand Together campaign, so welcome, thank you for being here. Ko Māsia Puru tōku ingoa, no Waikato tainui ahau, ko hau te rangai kaitaka wainga Māori o te pukunga here tikanga mahi, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Māsia Puru, I'm the NSL lead for the PSA Māori, and it's my absolute pleasure to be your MC today. Kia ora koutou. Look, just giving you an update in terms of why we're here today and the webinar that we're on that's happening today. It's our first Stand Together campaign to get you a pay increase, which compensates for cost of living increases. You'll also have the chance to ask questions and get answers. I'd like to, this week has been hugely significant for us. I just want to acknowledge the passing of the Fair Payment FPA Act 2022, which has been hugely significant. Thank you everyone who's contributed to that. But most importantly, whānau, the Stand Together action has begun. Today, this is the first negotiation proper on PSPA at not only an agency level, but a whole of public service. Stand Together action has also started with giving our support to our bargaining teams, where negotiations are striving for better pay that includes cost of living for our members. Thank you to everyone who have sent their messages of support to those in bargaining negotiations. We will provide copies of these messages to be put up on our website for you to view. I'd like to now introduce our panellists who are joining us today. First is Richard Wagstaff, the President of Te Kaimahi, the Council of Trade Unions, who is leading state sector unions in our negotiations for whole of public sector pay increases. Kia ora, Richard. Kia ora. Next we have Fleur Fitzsimmons, one of our PSA Assistant Secretaries who is leading our work on this mahi. Kia ora, Fleur.
Kia ora.
Next, I'd like to introduce our delegates who have joined us today, who are doing significant and amazing work out there, who are going to share their stories and the importance of PSPA to their bargaining, to their members and to themselves. Kia ora koutou, we've got Michelle Beattie. Michelle, kia ora. Michelle is a delegate from the Whangarei District Court who will speak about the bargaining and MOJ and how our members are feeling. We've got Joanna Houston.
Kia ora tātou.
A delegate from the Ministry of Education who will speak about the importance of this work for their bargaining and their members. And we've got Helen Foley. Joins us, a PSA National Delegate Co-Convener from Oranga Tamariki, who will speak also about the importance of PSPA and their bargaining for their members. Kia ora, Helen.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. So we'll start off with our first panellist. Before we do, any questions you may have, please write them in the chat box. We have someone looking after that for us and we'll be able to ask those questions at the end of the session. But I welcome our first panellist, Fleur Fitzsimmons, who will talk to us about what's happening right now in the public service in terms of bargaining and pay and the cost of living increases. Kia ora, Fleur.
Ngā mihi mai o hā, tēnā koutou katoa. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I want to start by acknowledging the PSA members, the delegates, and particularly members of bargaining teams who are on this webinar today, because the work that we are doing for the PSPA is for you and for your families. But it's also for high quality public services in New Zealand that we know so many New Zealanders do rely on. We know that if we treat you fairly, New Zealand will be able to deliver the public services that we need. I want to acknowledge the work of the PSA bargaining teams that have been in bargaining sometimes for many, many months. It's very important work, it's very valuable work, and I know that it's sometimes very, very difficult. We haven't seen the pay increases that we know our members need in bargaining, and that's why we're engaging in this PSPA process with the government and with employers. We know that the cost of living has not kept pace, that the wage increases have not kept pace with the cost of living. I just looked at my local supermarket this morning. 2 litres of milk cost $6.19. A kilo of cheese costs nearly $19. Our members need the cost of living addressed in their wages. The experience of unions is that when we are bigger, when the collective is bigger, we get better outcomes for our members. And that's why the PSA has joined with other unions through the Council of Trade Unions to work on the public sector pay adjustment to make sure our members get what they need. Just before I introduce Richard Wagstaff, I did want to ask everybody on this webinar to play a role in making sure that the PSA is set up for success in this process. And it means being active in your workplace, making sure that there is no worker in your workplace who hasn't been given the opportunity to join the PSA. We know that the main reason people don't join the PSA is because no one asked them to. Now it's more important than ever that everybody is given the opportunity to join the PSA and be part of this important work. Sitting beside me here is Richard Wagstaff, the President of the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions. He's a former National Secretary of the PSA, and he has a lot of experience in dealing with complex industrial negotiations over many, many years. And it's my pleasure to ask Richard to address you today.
Thank you, Trevor. Kia ora, everybody. Lovely to see you all, or as many as I can see. I just thought I'd speak a little bit about, where this came from, the PSPA, or the Public Sector Pay Adjustment. What we did at the CTU is in talking with certainly the PSA leadership and other unions of the state sector, we recognise that the existing wage restraint policies or bargaining parameters in the state sector, they were always challenging, but by the end of last year, we could see that they were really so unfit for purpose. We had a really big problem looking ahead. And we could only see a real industrial struggle and a real difficult period ahead if we didn't do something differently. And what was starting to emerge at the end of last year, of course, which has got worse, was high cost of living rises, and they were starting to creep up at the end of last year, early this year, and also very low unemployment, which between them both put real pressure not only on individual workers and their own budgets, but actually on the public sector to recruit and retain people at the same time. And we started to say, look, this isn't making sense. And we started to indicate to the government that, why don't we do things differently and break out of those pay restraint parameters and approach this year's bargaining in a different way, one that's more holistic, sort of doesn't leave anyone behind, allows us to work together and build our strength, but also provides a better political and industrial process, really, which is smoother and more even, and hopefully ends up with better outcomes all around. And we're conscious that also not only have union members, been struggling with the cost of living increases, they've also done an incredible job and buckled down, seeing through the COVID challenges on the public sector and the wider public sector. And we're very clear that we don't want to feel taken for granted in that process. We did our thing. We worked really hard, got us through it. We expect to be not, and we were patient with bargaining. We don't expect to be taken advantage of in that period. And certainly, we're looking at others who are putting up their prices, like the prices in the supermarket, like the extraordinary profits coming out of the private sector. You all hear the over $2 billion ANZ just posted. Everyone else can put their prices up, and we think it's time that the cost of labour went up, so we get our share in that as well. So what we did was we indicated to the government that this is the way we're thinking, and then in late May we actually wrote formally to the government and we said, we proposed the idea of a public sector pay adjustment. We had a few core elements to that. We said it needs to apply to everybody, whether they're about to go into bargaining or even if they're in an existing agreement that isn't really keeping up with the cost of living. We need an ability to actually address all workers throughout the public sector. we need to not only cover the public sector, meaning the core public service, the other sort of the outer onion rings of the public service, the state-owned enterprises, SOEs, Crown-owned companies, various government agencies, but also health, education, and the funded sector. Well, our proposal was that it covers everyone really who was working in the state sector or for the state sector. We said it needs to also involve a process that goes back to every single union member and collective agreement, and union members get to vote on whether they want it or not. So nothing here was being hatched behind closed doors that you don't get to agree or not. The process has always been about trying to get a decent proposal there that can be put to members and delegates and officials, and you can decide whether or not you want it or whether you want to stay with what you've got. So it's always about what's there to gain here, and it was never about anything less than that. We also said that you know, this has to really it can't be about subtracting anything that we've got. I know that often in bargaining we have employers say, oh, we want to subtract progression, for example, off the offer we're making you. We were really clear that all existing commitments, pay equity commitments, pay progression commitments, everything else cannot be impacted by this negatively. And so we got a message back from the government quite quickly that said, sure, let's get into that process. That's got a lot of merit. They knew that was coming. We've got a couple of issues. One is we want to talk to you about the timing of it, when would it come into place. We'd like to talk to you about the relationship between pay and non-pay. I mean, how do we get time to talk about those other things? We want to talk to you about the actual scope and coverage, because what you're asking for is incredibly wide and big and large and complicated. We don't know if we can do all of that. And we want to talk to you about how do we address the needs of the lowest paid in particular, how do we have a focus on that. And since that time, we've been engaged with unions, the PSA, education unions, health unions, and so on. And we've been going through a series of conversations to sort of try to address those issues. That's been quite a long and difficult conversation. It hasn't really resolved in anything too much. And finally, about a month ago, it went to Cabinet so that they could basically come and negotiate with us. When they came back, they said, we're ready to go. We've had those conversations, but we want to do it bit by bit. We want to do it with a public sector conversation, we want to do it with a health conversation, and we want to do it with an education conversation. And so I know that now that those unions, and I know the PSA has been part of that, the public service, the education unions have begun that conversation. I think the PSA has too, and the education unions will be probably having that conversation in a few days to begin the process of actually trying to work up a proposal that would go out to all members, collective by collective, and it would be about adjusting either their current collective or about renegotiating their expired collective to a level which we've said needs to reflect the cost of living pressures that working people are under. You know, that is absolutely vital. And I think also needs to reflect the effort that we've been making in the public sector to maintain things through extraordinarily difficult processes and times with COVID. So that's kind of where we've got to. We're at a key moment now. It's a really good time to be working in this campaign, to be wearing green, and to basically be getting out there with members and your colleagues and saying, let's do this, because the more that the government and the employers can see a joint approach, not just with 80,000 PSA members, but actually 200,000 union members or more, the more strength we'll have, and I think the more influence we'll have in getting the kind of outcome that we want. So, that's the background where we are now. Thank you.
Kia ora, Richard. Thank you very much, Fleur and Richard. I'd like to introduce Michelle. Michelle from MMOJ, Whangarei District Court. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou I tēnei ahihahi. Ko Michelle Biti ahau, he uri no Ngāti Hine, Ngāti Manu, Te Hika Tū, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei me te whanau a Apanui. E mahi ana ahau ki te tahu o te ture, I te koti a whānau ki Whangarei Te Ringa Parawa. Kia ora everyone, my name is Michelle Beattie. I'm a descendant of Ngāti Hine, Ngāti Manu, Te Hika Tū in the Bay of Islands, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei in Auckland, and Te Whanau Apanui in the East Coast. As you heard from Marcia, I work for the Ministry of Justice. I am a Deputy Registrar in the Family Court in Whangarei. Just in terms of where we're at, just an update on bargaining. We have been engaged in bargaining with our employer for over 5 months now. And today marks the first day where we will have our members report back meeting, where we can discuss and present the very disheartening proposal that has been put forward by our employer. And look to have our membership endorse our bargaining team to move to industrial action should we need to. The current climate at the Ministry of Justice at the moment is an uncertain one. We have our members, our kaimahi, our people are struggling to put kai on the table. Our people are struggling to make ends meet. And we have people leaving the organisation at an alarming rate. And this is a direct result of our poor pay rates that are exacerbated by the current cost of living and inflation pressures. In terms of how our members are feeling, as you can all appreciate, they're incredibly disheartened. They're incredibly disappointed and, for lack of a better word, hurt. Our members, our kaimahi, are incredibly mamai to feel that they are not valued for the mahi that they do, for the service they provide in upholding justice and providing a fair and equitable access to justice for all New Zealanders. So at this time, it is very difficult. It is a very difficult climate. And so the opportunity to be a part of PSPA and hopefully drive to get those cost of living increases will greatly support our kaimahi. And that in turn will ensure that we continue to provide a great service to the public of Aotearoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Michelle. Ngā mihi. I'd like to welcome next Joanna Houston, delegate from MOE. Kia ora, Joanna.
Kia ora, Marcia. Tēnā tātou katoa. E mihi ana kia koutou katoa I tai mai nei ki tēnei hui, tēnei ahiahi. Ko whakapuna ki tuku maunga, ko waroa tuku awa, ko takitimu tuku marae, ko Ngāti Apatu tuku hapu, ko Joanna Houston tōku ingoa. He uri a hau no kau nunu waka. I am a hinunga māngai Māori and co-convener for the PSA union at Te Tāhuhu o Mātauranga. And I'm also one of the 4 public sector māngai for the public sector rūnanga rōpū that we have. I just want to acknowledge PSA for this kaupapa and the opportunity to kōrero today and to mihi out to all of our rūnanga members who are on this call. Tēnā tātou. In terms of what's going on at the Ministry of Education at the moment, is a pretty hard place to be, not going to lie about that. Coming out of the lockdowns and 2 years of constant disruption and uncertainty, we've noticed as a national delegate the fatigue of our people, and especially within education, looking at the unprecedented shift of having to move things online learning for our tamariki, for our whānau, and then having to integrate back into normality again in what was prior to COVID. So there's a lot of fatigue. We were supporting the sector, our communities, our people, our whānau, and then we are now working through bargaining and trying to get some reflection around all of that mahi captured in our income. And we've not been able to get that across the line. Sure, we've talked about other things through the bargaining process, but when it comes to valuing our time, our expertise, and everything that we've poured into our mahi over the last couple of years, that hasn't been realised yet. So on top of that, we are now working through a formal restructure. The proposal and consultation period is out for us. So our mahi is huge at the ministry. You know, we've got tiredness, we've got bargaining, and then we have, on top of all of that, some uncertainty around employment assurance. So it's distressing. And we are 2 months out from Christmas, and our whānau are saying we can't handle this. You know, we've got members who can't afford to get a warrant of fitness because they need pūtea to be able to get their vehicle fixed. We've got members who are skipping meals in order for their tamariki to have kai when they go to school. And we have members who are not promoting the public service as a place to work for their children, for their tamariki, because this is our reality right now. All of that wrapped up is why we do what we do. It's why we work as hard as we work. And I think also what's missing in the kōrero is our people are our taonga, right? Our union members, our public servants, we are what makes the public service available to our community, to our hapori. And if we are not being protected and valued, and we are not being supported adequately that reflects our value and our worth, then what does that say about our employer? So the public service pay adjustment from our perspective is there to enable that piece where we can't get across the line, the value in our remuneration, that hopefully at that level, the public service pay adjustment will get that for us. Make no doubt, our value and our worth is for us to determine. It is not for the employer to dictate to us. We give so much more outside our employed hours. And all we are asking for is to be valued for the hours that we deliver, that we are employed to do. Don't think that that is a big, tall order to ask of our employers in 2022. I don't. I don't think that that is lost on our employer either. So for us, my pātai, on behalf of the Runanga people that I represent, on behalf of the membership that I represent, my pātai is, where is your moral compass at, people? You know, the PSPA is working for us, and if they can ask that question on behalf of us to our employer to show our value and worth through remuneration 2 months up from Christmas, then kapai, that's awesome. So yeah, standing united alongside all of the other organisations for me is an absolute bonus, and it is worthy of our time and it is worthy of our commitment. So kia ora PSA, kia ora.
Kia ora, Joanna. Ngā mihi ki a koe. I'd like to welcome now Helen Foley from Oranga Tamariki. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko Helen Foley, takuinga no Otatahi Ahau. I am the PSA National Convener for Oranga Tamariki, and my counterpart, Hinonga Mangai Māori delegate Bronnie, is on the call, but we tossed a coin and I got the hot seat. So Bronnie is here too to support the kōrero. So our bargaining at Oranga Tamariki has been going for over a year, and today would have been quite a big day for our members if there hadn't been some changes in the last few days, that at 3 o'clock today we were walking off the job, and we had got to the point where enough was enough, and we had a whole series of industrial actions planned over the next 3 weeks, which our members voted for, were very supportive of, and were well behind the bargaining team to make that decision. It has been a long, hard road in our bargaining with Oranga Tamariki, and just echoing what Joe and Michelle have said, the attitude of the employer has been really disappointing in terms of valuing kaimahi. And we're talking kaimahi from frontline all the way up to in our head offices, who still, everyone does important work. In our organisation, everyone comes to work to keep children safe and support whānau. We also worked through a pandemic, trying to do those critical responses to keep children and whānau safe. It's a tough place to work at Oranga Tamariki, same with a lot of other public sector agencies. The workload is really too much for people to do good work consistently. And obviously a lot of scrutiny on Oranga Tamariki, which makes it really hard for people to come to work and feel good about the job that they do. So we want to acknowledge the support that we get from our colleagues and other public sector agencies, just kind of having our back around that. That's really important. I suppose for us, we've come to a bit of a crossroads with our bargaining. We've taken a pragmatic approach in terms of separating out pay and non-pay, which, because of the pressure that our members created through the industrial action, we have had achievements with the things that we've been asking for around non-pay over the last few days from our employer around workload and other things that are very important to people, not just pay. So we've explained to our members why we have done that and why we have paused the industrial action, because PSPA is very important for us to support as a membership. What we were offered from our employer was not going to meet people's what people are kind of finding at the end of the day, just trying to pay their bills. And so the messaging we've been giving to our members and our delegates is, we've got now more than just the members within Oranga Tamariki supporting us in this. We've got a whole union movement behind us to get a cost of living increase, and it's really, it's energized our members. It's exciting to be part of a union movement. A lot of it's about like, what does the union do for me? And this is what the union does for you. And so it's an exciting time to see what's going to happen with the PSPA. Our members are wary though, because we've been in bargaining a long time. So we've been saying we need to trust this process. We need to see what can be delivered. We know what we know you're important, your mahi is important, and you need to be remunerated fairly for that. So it's been a long road for us and our members in bargaining at Oranga Tamariki, and we're really hoping this is a light at the end of the tunnel for us. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Hayley. Kia kaha koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Look, this is our portion of Q&A session, and I see we've got a number of questions. So we're going to kind of give you a brief rundown of the questions received so far. Perhaps Richard and Fleur, you can determine which of you would want to answer these questions to get us started. They've come from our members online, so thank you very much. A number of questions, Richard, have come about how pay rises would apply to people. Would people at the top of their range also get it? And what would that look like? And would people who have already settled this year also be entitled to receive it? So there's 3 questions there, Richard.
Well, what I can tell you is what we proposed, but I can't tell you what's going to be agreed, and that'll be worked out obviously by each part of bargaining. But basically what we proposed was that we do an adjustment for everybody, whether they've got a collective agreement in place or they're in bargaining for a new one and they're renegotiating. So we're saying that if you've got an agreement already in place that's looking a bit tired now given the cost of living, that we want to vary it, do a variation and lift the pay rates in it so that it can address the current pressures. If you're in an expired agreement like Oranga Tamariki, obviously we would hope that this PSPA framework will allow a much better offer than would have otherwise happened under the pay restraint parameters that were there. In terms of what comes of it, the employers and the government have generally said they favour a flat rate kind of increase, so that it advances the percentage is higher for the lower paid than the higher paid. But again, we've said to them that we think it's not that simple. There are real pressures throughout the system. We absolutely see a need to address the pressures on the low paid because they feel inflation more than anybody else because of a good economist will tell you. But nonetheless, we do think everybody's deserving of a decent adjustment, and we've been impressing upon them that needs to occur.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, our position is that backdating must apply, that this is separate to the progression that already exists, and that it does apply to expired collective agreements that are currently enforced, because let's face it, everybody is facing the increased cost of living, and that includes people over 100,000. I saw some comments in the chat about that as well. So that's certainly the PSA's position going into the negotiations. And as Richard commented, there has been some discussions just today between the PSA representatives and those at Te Kawa Mataho. And the feedback I've had from those who attended is that it was a very constructive and positive meeting. So we're certainly hopeful at this stage.
Kia ora. And I was just thinking, there's been questions around timeframes, and we know good things take time, but do we have any indication around what their timeframes look like in terms of PSPA negotiations?
Well, from our point of view as a movement, we're saying get on with it, or it's already a couple of months too late. We need to really press fast. I mean, there's been incredible pressure, I know, on the likes from the delegates today explaining in their bargaining. We think there's no time to lose, and it's real. I don't know how your bargaining is getting on, but I would hope we're talking weeks, not months. Certainly, we don't want to be in this place this time next year. That's for sure. I would like to see us get a result before the end of the year if we can. That would be highly desirable. In part, it depends on how well we bind together and demonstrate our determination.
Another question being asked, Richard or Fleur, what does negotiating across the public sector actually look like? Who meets with whom, and what are what does that look like in terms of negotiating cross broadly other unions?
That's such a good question, because many, many years ago, the PSA used to negotiate across like this. We used to have this kind of combined approach to negotiations, and it was when we saw better outcomes for our members. And so it is sort of going back to that kind of across the public service type negotiation, and it's the same principle that underlines fair pay agreements. But in practice, what it looks like is that our National Secretary, Kerry Davies, and our Assistant Secretary, Alex Davies, are meeting with Te Kawa Mataho. And now they have had a lot of engagement with all of our bargaining teams. They are speaking to our advocates, and our executive board is actively involved in reporting on this process as well. So it does really have a whole of public service union feel about it. And that's certainly welcome from our perspective, because we knew when the PSA bargained like this in the past, we were able to deliver better outcomes for our members.
In terms of the structure of it broken into 3 bits, that in part reflects the sort of the architecture behind it. As I understand it, the Public Service Commission has the ability to bargain on behalf of the public service. In the health sector, it's got to be Te Whara Ora has the authority, not the Public Service Commission. And in the education sector, it's the Secretary for Education who has that ultimate authority. So that's partly why it's broken into 3 bits. I actually neglected to mention before, the funded sector. This is an area where we've had some agreement to enter into a parallel process, but some of these issues around who's representing who and the mandates and so forth become a little bit more complex. But we have asked for an urgent meeting with ministers to get that parallel sector, that parallel process for the funded sector going, because those workers tend to be lower paid than the rest of us. So it's incredibly important we address that too.
Kia ora, thank you. A lot of questions, Vano. Thank you very much. There is a question here around, is the PSPA covering a coal increase, or will it include the now stored common terms conditions work? Fleur.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And what we've wanted to do is to see the common terms and conditions work continue and start to be implemented in collective agreements. But we have found some resistance to that from Te Kawa Mataho. Some of those will be coming up quite soon. They are agreed, but the public service pay adjustment really is focusing on pay and that cost of living. That'll be what's happening at that level. Within individual bargaining, we've already heard from Helen about the terms and conditions that have been discussed in Oranga Tamariki. There will be others in justice, there'll be others in education, and in the collective agreements that come up for negotiation in the next week while. But that common terms and conditions work is so important, and it's really about starting to reunify the public service in the way that we know delivers better outcomes for people working in it.
Why can't we just apply more pressure by taking industrial action on this?
I may well come to that yet, but at the moment we're hopeful that we can deliver an outcome that recognises the cost of living increases. But we've already seen movement from Oranga Tamariki, which was on the eve of strike action. So we know that our members' industrial strength is being heard by employers, it's being heard by the government, and that's why we're really asking you to be active in your workplaces, wear green, talk to other people about joining the union, make sure that the employers and the government are really seeing that strength of the PSA across the public service, because we do know that will help us deliver better outcomes for everyone.
And I think this campaign, all the work that we're doing, is part of industrial action. Absolutely, that may involve stopping work, but I think you've already begun that campaign, and the stronger and bolder we are building that campaign, making it clear that it's not just a few agencies, it's everybody, the louder and more influential the action will be.
And what can our members do to help? What can we really do to add strength to the campaign?
The starting point is talk to non-members about joining, and I know I've said that 4 times now, but it bears repeating because it's really important. We need to make sure that everybody in every workplace has the opportunity to join the union. Wearing green is a good message. We've got some great stickers. Have meetings, get your bargaining teams talking to you. And I know that's happening in the Ministry of Justice. It's happened in Oranga Tamariki. Use the opportunity to talk about why this cost of living increase is so important to you, to your families, to our other members and to our non-members, because we really do need to see that activity. Tell us those stories. Make sure that the people negotiating on our behalf are left in no doubt about the value of this to you and their families. And we've already had some incredible feedback from members about the cost of living pressures that they're facing. And I want to mahi to our delegates who have spoken to us today, because it's those stories about our members and their lives and the need for this to deliver for them that will help us get something positive over the line.
And I think just generally making it known that this matters to you in your discussions in the workplace, if you have to put up resources, doing what you can to make it known to your local managers and local chief executives that you're very much engaged in this and very determined to get a good outcome, and you're not it's not a casual interest. It's very central to your thinking, and you're very proud to be part of it. And we need to create some momentum here, and that's doesn't matter how clever your negotiators are. What will really count is what's going on out there, and those employers and the government understanding how important it is to get this right.
I wonder if Joe and Michelle and Helen would like to comment on that in terms of what you're seeing in your workplaces that members can get active in and get involved in, and kind of what's worked from your perspective within those workplaces for members to know about this and to see its value and get active.
I'm happy to jump in, because I suppose when we were looking at our industrial action campaign, we decided to choose a colour for our industrial action campaign, and it was actually green. So sorry, everybody, that's probably why you're wearing green. Which is a good colour, because it's about let's go. And I think Joe, our national organiser, is on the call, and he came up with a really good slogan and everything. So we had one of our last bargaining dates. We encouraged all our members across the Motu to wear green, send photos. People had morning teas. There were green banners up, and it was a really good way to get members to feel included in the bargaining process, because a lot of it can feel quite removed, bargaining team and members. So it was a really good way to get everyone together and go look at the support from your colleagues around the country. So something as simple as a colour, lots of members meetings, the background that I think Marcia's got on, I'd really like a copy of that one. I've got, just the signature that came out in the newsletter, encouraging members just to put that on as their email signature, things that are just really simple for people to do, and it's not an add-on to their daily work, wearing a colour and putting an email signature on. So those are the things we've kind of really encouraged members to do, which has been pretty well taken up. So yeah, that's kind of what we've done in our agency.
Yeah, I'd just like to tautoko what Helen said there about the colour campaign. As you can see, Helen, the green is working. So yes, today is the first time where we at the Ministry of Justice are all wearing green. So this is our first day. It's an awesome opportunity, and it's a visual representation of our collectivism and our unionism. We also have merchandise coming. We've got stickers, lanyards, and the like. We have Zoom backgrounds, Facebook frames, we have signatures, as Helen touched on as well. And in terms of moving forward and looking ahead, what we reflected on as a bargaining team was what worked well for us historically, which wasn't that long ago. If anybody remembers and recalls our industrial action of 2018, and what was really impactful then was the work to rule. Matters that we put into effect, because it demonstrated how essential the Ministry of Justice truly is, and how it interfaces with other government agencies. And it was also a great way to demonstrate to our members, to have them participate and feel like they have that sense of belonging to our bargaining campaign, to our call. But it was also a great way for the public to interact. And it was a great opportunity for our stakeholders to actually see, wow, our kaimahi, our staff are really poorly paid, and I didn't realise they did this much work. And so using that context and that history has been a great platform for us to reflect on without having our members being penalised. We're very mindful that it's Christmas, not too long ago. We're already struggling, and so we don't want to see our members suffer any longer. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. I would have to say that the Colour Campaign Solidarity for us was a really easy step forward for the National Delegate Committee to want to lean into and help promote across our organisation nationally. And it's been wonderful to see the photos, to see people come on board. Also, I think it helps us at a local level with the ministry and our bargaining space to not feel alone, because we've got members across our pay bands who are really feeling the financial impact of the high cost of living right now. It's not only those who sit in the lower pay bands, but there are people in the higher pay bands who are on one income who are equally feeling that. And there are those who work really hard in those higher pay bands who have earned and worked hard to get there, who are also feeling that injustice around the lack of value and the reflection in their income. So the Colour Campaign has helped sort of bridge those people that were all united in the same kōrero or in the same cause, regardless of what our salary is. I think the other thing too is that for our members who are finding this process really stressful, because we are only 2 months out from Christmas, that it isn't only about the majority of the voice. This is the whole purpose of the union, to try and get something good for all of us, something that is justified and valued across the line for all of us, as opposed to only the majority and the minority miss out on that. We have lots of ideas around how we can support one another. And I think that our National Delegate Committee constantly focus on the dynamics locally for us around bargaining, around the interactions and the relationships that we have. That's made complicated by a restructure at the moment, but it almost works for us because our interaction with our members are at its peak right now. I do want to say though that on a broader level, you know, for us delegates, especially those who are in convener roles, we interact in other spaces as well. And so that sense of unity for us, when we are the ones who are carrying a lot of responsibility in an elected role, seeing one another, like seeing Helen, seeing Bronnie, seeing, you know, Michelle and Rebecca and others from other Crown agencies in bargaining with the same struggles, and we're all wearing green, it's actually quite uplifting. And it fills my cup to know that we aren't alone, that it's not solely only the MOE, that there are others who we care about who are in the same boat. So I'm a big fan. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Hey, look, that really is drawing us to a close of our webinar. I would really like to thank our panelists for joining us today and sharing their kōrero with us. It's really important kaupapa. I just want to let you know that the recording of this webinar will be online. We didn't get to all the questions that you asked, but we will be putting an FAQ on the website, so please check with those and let your members know they can go and check those questions around PSPA. And the other thing is check your emails for next week. We've got our Stand Together newsletter that's going out to you that will inform you of the next steps too for our campaign. So kia ora tātou katoa. I will close with the karakia. Kia inoi tātou. Kia tātou katoa te atawhai o tō tātou are ki ahu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, amini.
Ka kite.
Ka kite, thank you.
Ka kite.